Hello, potential viewers. Welcome to my channel. Now, with the news of leftist protesters having effectively stormed part of the Seattle Capitol Hill area and established some sort of a quote-unquote autonomous zone, an area controlled almost solely by them, and we have already seen armed groups patrolling the borders of this so-called autonomous zone and a call to destroy historical relics and statues and quote-unquote decolonize the history, as well as relatively culturally independent things like STEM started raging again. And this, for a cultured and educated Chinese individual like me, is nothing but familiar. And in the spirit of reminding people of the past horror, I would like to share some stories from the past, along with some of my commentaries. Bear in mind that these stories are shared and told word of mouth, and there were limited evidence to support their authenticity, so take it with a grain of salt. But,
these are the lived experiences retold by the survivors of historical oppression imposed by a racially homogeneous and patriarchal authoritarian regime. They are stunning and brave to have told these stories, and they should be believed in all cases. Shame on you if you have any shred of doubt, and you should know that you are a piece of shit.
First story is one of a young boy. His father and mother got married under somewhat of an unusual circumstances. His father was from a family of Chinese Communist Party members. Both his grandparents on his father's side were party members most of their lives and were both very staunch in their belief, especially his grandfather. As for the young boy's mother, he only knew that she came from a family of sinners. Her parents were dissidents, or maybe just normal people with some small levels of complaints of the policies enacted by the Chinese government. And they were exiled to faraway farms during the Cultural Revolution, and they ended up never leaving. This is no modern-day Romeo and Juliet story, however. Due to many reasons, the young boy was mainly raised by his grandparents when he was very young, and for a period of time he was co-raised by his parents and grandparents. During his younger years with his parents and grandparents under the same roof, it was rough for the boy, to say the least. His grandparents, being staunch Chinese Communist Party members, hold deep prejudice against his mother and never ceased to stoop to the level of telling the boy that her mother and her mother's family were tainted bad people because they hold grudges against the great Chinese Communist Party. This expectedly poisoned the family's relationships and almost brought the boy's parents to divorce. Later in his life, the boy was made aware that the relationship between his grandparents was far from perfect either. His grandmother once reported his grandfather to the authorities during the Cultural Revolution, a time where witch hunt for anti-revolutionaries or enemies of the state was the biggest political movement, and snitching among friends and families was a common tactic of moving up the political ladder or simply covering one's butt. The young boy's grandfather, on his father's side, was a humble and hard worker and luckily was under the supervision of a well-intentioned officer. The officer vouched for him in the face of the incoming investigation and was barely able to keep the persecution away until the Cultural Revolution blew over. If not for that, who knows what would have become of the boy's father. The second story is that of a professor. He was humble, he was smart, he was dedicated to knowledge and his craft. He had many students, whom he taught and mentored when nothing held back. He championed the revolution from the start, and he gave up his opportunity of a comfortable life outside of mainland China, and he decided to devote his life to the building of a socialist China. He received his education and training during the time where KMT ruled China, and he was outstanding and fortunate enough to receive a Western education, through which did he obtain his training in science and technology. Should he be able to continue his work, he would have imparted all of his knowledge upon thousands of younglings in the next generation. But his education and training become his downfall and his nightmare. As the Cultural Revolution rages on, his past experience as source of credential and knowledge became his sin. By virtue of him being educated by the old society and by malicious and antagonistic Western forces, he was thrown off his teachings and researching position. His students now turned on him, snitching his every unorthodox deed to the party and authorities, and even straight up lying about him. He was forced to apologize in a humiliating manner in public, shamed with degrading manners, and being forced to parade around town with humiliating signs hanging from his neck. His properties seized, his book collection burnt, and his families imprisoned. He was beaten, tortured by his former students, and in the end, in the deepest despair and the most unimaginable pain, he ended his life, leaving his families to deal with the harsh cold world without him. Tragic as it is, one could argue that this could be for the better for the families, because he is the target of persecution and his families are often within the blast radius of the incoming attacks. Third story was from a group of people, and it was once very, very common. They were once students, farmers, factory workers, or are of similar occupations with relatively low social power tier. Even after the establishment of the Chinese Communist Party rule in 1949, a state proclaiming to represent the people and the working class, they were still not in positions of power, understandably. Then the supreme leader Mao launched a call for a new wave of revolution against the quote-unquote anti-revolutionary officials, intellectuals, and the 9 categories of undesirables. They rallied to answer the call with red bands around their arms. They formed militias and revolutionary groups. They touted the slogans, "Smash the law and criminal justice system," and "Smash the old world order," and started attacking and even torturing not only the law enforcement agencies and their employees, but also intellectuals serving in schools and research institutions as well. They brought down and smashed historical statues, burned down historical buildings, confiscated and burned old books because they decided they were the symbols of the old world order. It is with the same reason they try to remove all of those who have received education from the time before the Chinese Communist Party came into being, and they form different factions basically at war with each other. The factions fought both via the propaganda machines and with actual arms and weapons in real life. Decades later, even after those many persecuted, wrongly sentenced, or driven to suicide have their names cleared, none but less than 10 of those people came forward to apologize for the harm they had done. The final story is that of a once very promising politician. He was the son of a high-ranking official from the original revolutionaries that established the rule of the Chinese Communist Party. His father was not exempt from the scourge of the Cultural Revolution, even given his important role in the original revolution and the position he was in after. This politician, before he ever became one, even joined in on the attack on his father for various reasons. It was even rumored that during a public trial session, he kicked his father so hard that it broke 3 of his father's ribs. After the Cultural Revolution, his father regained power and helped set up his path to political power as well. He later became the highest political official of an important province of China. However, this politician became too ambitious. Through his iron fist and Maoist style of ruling and ruthless anti-corruption and anti-gang campaigns, he gathered quite some political influence and fame. He intended to make it into the further inner circles of political power within the Chinese Communist Party, and was then charged with abuse of power, embezzlement, taking bribery, and was sentenced to life in prison. His name is Bo Xilai, and he is still serving his sentence as a political prisoner. Today, many in China, including some high-profile intellectuals, still defend the movement of Cultural Revolution and its alleged merits. It was a truly grassroots democratic movement, they say. It was a movement against corrupt government agencies and officials, they say. It was a movement to re-educate the cultural elites and intellectuals that are disconnected from the common folk, they say. Even granted that those were indeed aspects of the movement, which is sketchy to say the least, we still should not dismiss that the Cultural Revolution was a movement of mass insanity, pain, and suffering for many, if not absolute most of the people of the era. It was also undoubtedly a movement of mass destruction of cultural relics and artifacts. The sheer level of destruction of these historical records not only made the study of history and culture much more difficult for later generations. It also made it much easier for the government to rewrite history as it sees fit and propagandize based on the rewritten history. And if we are not granting those premises, it was a movement of violence and mob mentality aimed at seizing control, said by Mao, during a time when he felt that his authority was being threatened. The power-hungry and opportunistic people later jumped on the cause to revolutionize the society again, in a society and system that was neither democratic to begin with, and used the call to build a quote-unquote democracy as a club to beat others and political enemies. It was an unholy alliance between a revolutionary dictator and the power-hungry mobs. It was smaller scale of burn it down and we shall emerge victorious. Some say the Cultural Revolution broke the collective backbone of the Chinese people, and its aftermath will not fully surface until decades later. And as I said in one of my previous videos, the prevalent censorship, control of media, and even the authoritarian approaches enforced in many areas including Hong Kong and Xinjiang did not function so well without the complacency of the general public. When all you can do is shut up and hope that the mob did not see you, and if you had to, you can only snitch on your closest friends and families to keep you safe for a while. The social cohesion no longer exists, and trust can hardly be built on it. And in this rot and decay, authoritarianism thrives. Remember, the secret to happiness is freedom. The secret to freedom is bravery. That will be all for my video today. Hope you like it and hope to see you next time.